I actually made this video as a bunch of small videos. There's about 17 of them. They're all in a playlist in order on my channel if you want to watch it that way. I'll leave a link. But I put them all into one video and just recorded all the videos into this video here. There's also an intro video giving advice on what to do if you have the oil consumption problem like I did in replacing the engine because of that.
First thing I'm going to do is drain the coolant. I'm going to take this cap off here. In order to drain the coolant, it's this thing right up here. It's on the driver's side. I'm just going to grab that and just twist it to the left. I was able to do it by hand. And I just replaced the coolant on this, so I'm just going to keep my coolant in this bucket and then just reuse the same coolant when I'm done. And remember, coolant's really poisonous. It tastes good like cats and dogs. It can kill them, so just make sure to clean all this shit up. Next, I'm just going to start taking a bunch of this stuff off on top of the engine, get it out of the way. First thing you want to do really is remove the battery. And actually you need to remove this to get the battery tray removed. So there's just all these things. You just push this down and then it'll pop out like that. And then you just remove all these along the edges here. And to keep track of like all these bolts and fasteners and stuff, I just like to put them in like little bags. You write on the bags with Sharpie, label what they're for, tape them to what they're for. And you just remove these, or loosen up these two 10mm bolts here, take the terminals off. Next there's just two 10mm bolts here. You know, bolts like that I can just leave in the spot, I'll just leave it there so I don't lose it. For now I'm just going to leave this attached. I can, you know, take it apart later if it gets in the way, but now you can pull the battery out. Plastic base on the bottom, you just got to pull on it, it'll just pop up. It has that thing holding it in. And this battery thing's going to have to come out of the way. There's 12mm, two there, a couple over here. The bottom of it's got two of these things that you need to squeeze out. This one, there's two more 10mm. Next I'm going to remove the airbox. Those two things there. Loosen up that 10mm there. Now this piece will come up. I'm going to disconnect the wires from it. So you just push down on this and then that'll pull back. And then there's like these two things here, one here, one here. Just take a pair of needle nose and you just squeeze those tabs in, then it'll just pop through the other side. Then that'll come off. We can pull the element out. Now there's three 10mm bolts down here holding this thing in. Then that you just pull this part off of here, it'll come up. And it has part of the wiring harness here with that same type of clip you can remove with the needle nose. Now I'm going to remove this part. Might as well remove the hose from here with it. Mine was busted at a quick fix. I replaced the valve cover gasket, but normally there'd be this thing here. You just slide that back and then you can just pull that off. And there's going to be this little hose here with another clamp. You get that off. The wiring harness right here. This you just push down on the back, it'll pull off. This has another one of those little things down here you gotta squeeze and then it'll lift up. And then you just gotta squeeze this, pull the whole thing off. Then there's still just that one part down there. You need to get this off. Actually, it's easier if you just leave it on down there and then pull it off here. It was hard to get off there. This one was really easy to pull off. I'm going to start taking the exhaust manifold out too. I'll probably just remove the whole thing. It looks like I'll be able to do that. We'll see. I just got this heat shield here that has two 12s. And there's two more 12s, one there and then one on the other side. Then you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 12s in the exhaust manifold. And I'm going to remove this ground wire here to help get the wrench on with that bolt. And I just have this PVC pipe that I use as a cheater bar. Works perfect for this. Yeah, this thing is free now. I'm going to remove this connector for the O2 sensor there. and then I can just leave the O2 sensor on it, and then figure out how to, there's a clip here holding the cord on, and figure out how to release that. The connector is a real bitch to get off. I had to push on this button really hard with a screwdriver, and then I put a pair of pliers around this to pull it out with. Now I'm going to remove the connections here. It looks like there's two, I think they're 14 millimeters behind those springs, and then there's just a couple of mounting points there and there. Look like they're also 14 millimeters. There's a screw there and then one there. Probably doesn't matter which ones you remove. And then one there and one there. It looks like they're all 14s. Yeah, that thing will just come right out the top. It's super easy. I think you actually have to remove the bolts that go onto the engine though. These ones are just nuts on the end of it, so these things stick out. And I covered up the exhaust there, so I don't drop any tools or a bunch of coolant down there. Since my new engine came with these, I might as well switch to the newer ones. So you just take the wire off there, you just press down the back of it, pull them off. I found the easiest way is just use a pair of needle nose, squeeze this, makes it a lot easier. And you can remove these, there's a 10 millimeter ball here, one here. And then I'm gonna go ahead and remove this there. Gonna go ahead and get this hose out of the way. It's the same with the other one. You like stick a big flat thing in there, you can turn it and get it started. It makes it a lot easier. Next I'm gonna remove the fuel rail. So first you can get the wiring off. There's this one here. There's these ones that are underneath, and this is on the passenger side. You just have to squeeze that really hard, pull it out. And then the bolts that are holding it on are hidden under this. You just need to take a screwdriver and just pry that off. It'll just pop off. And then there's three more of these ones on the bottom, and then this one over here. These here are both 12 millimeter, and the repair manual says you're supposed to unpressurize the fuel system before you take these off at all. I didn't do that, but if you don't do that like me, and I'll leave a link to the owner's manual, it'll explain how to do that, but I didn't do that, it was fine. You just want to wear safety glasses. As soon as you take off these 12 millimeter bolts, fuel is going to kind of spray out of here because they'll be pressurized, so wear some glasses and then put a rag over it too to contain it, and all the fuel just spilled out of here. Cover up the injectors so they don't fall off and get fuel all over the place. For the intake manifold bolts, there's 5 on the top. The easiest way to get to them is just to like kind of kneel on top of the engine of the car, really. There's one in the middle here. There's one in here. You get an extension, you can just get it in through there. There's one underneath here. You can feel it with your hand. And then there's 2. There's just nuts that go over this, and then over this stud here. And there's gonna be 2 more underneath. So you're gonna have to get under the car. And the best way is to just get all the way behind the subframe to where you're kind of under the drive shaft. So there's one here, right there. Hold on. One right there, as you can see. And then there's another one. Right there. That one you can see when you're more forward. There it is, right there. Okay, so to get that one on the right side or the passenger side, I use an extension use this extension here. You're gonna want a pretty big ratchet. Mine were really hard to break loose. The ones on the top were too. Found the easiest way was to stick the ratchet here with your left hand. Reach around the left side of the drive shaft. And you're gonna want to take your right arm and put it around whatever this thing's called, around all the suspension crap, and up here like that to hold the ratchet and the extension in place, and then you can pull down on it with your left hand. You can kind of put your knees up under the subframe too to help brace yourself, and probably like the longer the bar you have, the better. It was really hard to break loose. So for that bolt there, mine is really hard to get off. So I just picked this up from Harbor Freight with the extensions, and you know, that got the bolt off no problem. So this thing is actually free now. You can put a little screwdriver right in that gap there and start to pry it off. And then it's loose now. There's still just like some hoses and stuff over here that are connecting, that are on the carburetor that you need to remove. So you've got this wire here. The button to release is right there. You just push down on it. I'm going to remove this bracket. It's a 12mm bolt. And we've got this hose right here. And there's one or two. There's this hose right here, and we'll see what else there is after I get those off. So that was the only other thing attached to it besides this hose right here, but you can remove it after the stuff on the carb. And then the manifold, you actually can get it out from the engine bay. These studs here that were on the top of the head holding in the manifold, I completely removed those. When you're removing it, you have to move it this way and take the carb first and move it this way up at that angle like that. You won't be able to get it straight out. You just have to move it up that way and you can get it out. I'm just going to start removing more of the wiring harness. You got a 10mm bolt here, a couple of 10mm here, and let's see, you can like disconnect all of these. For this one here, you just squeeze this button on the back right there. For this one here, you have to push on this really hard. I pushed on it with a screwdriver. You have to push it kind of hard. And you got this white one down here, and this is the last thing on this side. Looks like you just push down on that part. For this one here, you have to pull back the rubber, and then the button on it is, well, you don't have, now that you know where the button is, you probably don't have to pull back the rubber, but the button for it is right there. Get that one there, you press down there. So with this one here, there's a cap that you need to pry off, and then there's a 10mm ball, and then it's just a ground wire right there. And then this is attached in the back of here with these things that you can like, you have to squeeze on the inside of the needle nose and get them out. I'll probably use a screwdriver for that top. You kind of have to use a screwdriver for both of those. Or it might be easier just to sort of break them out. And then there's just this one end of the wire down here. Easier to get this one from underneath. The button is on the top facing upwards, and it's way in the back here. And you've got this thing holding on the wire harness here in the back of the engine. This thing is just a rubber thing on this metal thing, and you can just pry it off with a screwdriver, but it just pops off. And then looks like we got another one of those right there. Down here, get the O2 sensor here. Here the button is like right here. I took a pair of pliers and just squeezed it. It made it easy. Yeah, and then there's one of those rubber things on the metal there, one there, and then down here there's another thing underneath there. You can feel it, and then there's another one down here somewhere. It's easy. You can just feel it, and then peel that back, and actually it's just a ground wire there with a 10mm bolt holding it on. Next I'm going to start removing all the coolant hoses. I'm going to remove this first. There's a 10mm bolt here, 10mm bolt back here, and then obviously this clamp and the hose right here. This other hose on the bottom right here. Get these two hoses off. This one can be a fucking bitch because it rests like up against this part. I had to jam the screwdriver in there and then like really wedge the screwdriver under it to kind of break it loose, and then just pull on it really hard and twist it back and forth. Oh yeah, another thing that made this one hard to get off is this clamp thing here. This thing was sticking out farther and it's supposed to fit through that hole, but it wouldn't line up properly most of the time. So I just took a pair of my dikes and just cut that thing off there. So we're gonna get this hose and this one down here. Yeah, so these hoses are just such a pain in the ass to get off. I just decided to take this metal thing off the engine. There's 3 10mm, one down here and then 2 right there. And I'm still trying to remove, actually I might not even, I'm still trying to remove this one. I might not have to remove this one, I'm not sure yet. Yeah, I did the same thing with this one. Fuck it, it's way easier. There's just 2 here, 1 there, 1 there, all 10mm. It's pretty much, that's all the coolant hoses I think attached to the engine. Now there's this one down here, but I already disattached the other end of it. But I might as well get that out of the way. Just gotta remember where it goes. And then probably a good idea to try to remove this one right here actually, because then you can take this and just move all this crap more out of the way. I couldn't really get it out from that end, but getting it off from this plastic thing was easy. Just be careful you don't break the plastic. And then you just have to, there's this weird clip on it, you just have to push the end out that way. Remove it from that thing. Now I can just get that over here out of the way. And you probably could do this without removing the radiator, like there might be just enough room down there, but if you just kind of like tied the AC compressor back, but I think it'll just make it a lot harder, especially when you're putting the engine back in, so might as well just remove the radiator. So there's 2 12s here with these things on them, and then there's a 12, 12. I'm not sure if you have to take this out, but it's probably the easier way. And then there's 2 more 12s on down here too. And then this thing will just pop off. You might want to remove the hood latch, or I'm just, fuck, just sprayed coolant in my face. This hose popped off. So I'm just gonna put it right back there after I move the radiator. So I can close the hood again since my car's outside. I can't just leave it with the hood open. And you just need to get this wire off. It just pushes right there, slides off. And there's all these things. Just gonna kind of yank them out. If they break, I don't really care. You can always use zip ties. Then there's another one down here for the other fan. Right there. So I'm just going to disconnect that and then rip all these things out. The trim removal tool works good for these also. This hose too, you got to disconnect either there or there. And then there's 2 more 12s here and here. Get this thing off the top. And that's the AC compressor there, so we can't pull that out. Okay, so the trick is with this is the AC compressor is sitting on top of these 2 holes on the bottom, so you have to lift the AC compressor off of that plastic base and then slide the radiator and fan assembly forward and get it free of that and lift it out. Just be really careful with the AC compressor, like you don't want to damage all the fins and that plastic thing sticks out. For me it was a bitch to get it off the one over here on the passenger side, so you know, make sure you don't break it. And then I just pulled the whole thing out like that with the hoses still on it. You just got to make sure that the hose on the passenger side gets put underneath this AC line first. And then you can just pull the whole thing upwards. And then I went ahead and just put this back on with the 2 top bolts on. And I'm going to go ahead and grab this thing too so I have my shelf back and I can stop dropping all my fucking tools down there. Because this is, you know, this is the most convenient shelf to put your tools. Maybe you're removing these 3 bolts now. The 2 on the top, you might as well just go over the top of the engine. The one on the bottom's being a real fucking bitch for me, but you can fit a ratchet on there. Alright, so I finally got this 3rd bolt off.
So this video here might seem a little out of order, but after I did this job I realized this is going to be the fastest, most efficient way to do it. Also the safest, because you won't be working underneath the engine with just your cherry picker holding it, you know, just in case that thing does fail. And it makes it easier so you're not going underneath the engine, underneath the car with the cherry picker legs in the way. And then this way you don't have to set up a jack first and then set up the cherry picker. So the next thing that is easiest to do is just go underneath the car and get all the bolts that you need to go under the car in order to get them. And then after that, set up the cherry picker and then do everything from the top. So there's just a few more things to do from the bottom. There's one bolt, or that's actually a nut, that you need to get from the bottom that is for the engine mount. There's the torque converter bolts. There's 4 bolts on the bottom that connect the transmission to the engine, the bell housing bolts. If you're just, some of the transmissions only have 3 on the bottom. I think the 2-wheel drives one do. Mine has 4. There's also, besides those 4 that are right on the bottom, there's 2 more up from those that are actually easiest to get from the bottom too. I didn't show them in this video, but they are easier to get from the bottom. There's one around the back. You can reach way up, like if you kind of sit up, you can get that. And the one on the front is easier to get from the bottom too, so I'd recommend doing those. And then there's also the AC compressor is held on by 4 bolts. You need to get the belt, the serpentine belt off, and you need to get the engine mount off in order to get the serpentine belt off. So that's why it's easier to do it in this order. But there's 2 bolts on the bottom, easier to get from underneath. Just get those 2 off first. It'll hold the AC compressor in place fine, I think, before you get the belt off. So just do those first. And then there's actually another bolt on the bottom of this that's like totally hidden. You can see on the new one here, it comes out there, so there's going to be a bolt on the bottom. Okay, so you're kind of going to have to get this thing from underneath. It was not working trying to get it on top. To get at it, you're going to want to remove this plastic shield that's right here. These clips you should have removed already to get the splash guard off, and then there's just 2 up here. That'll help you get up there easier. You actually don't need too long of an extension, because you can stick, you just need the ratchet to get down here. And yeah, now you can see where the bolt is right there. So yeah, if you have like 8 inches of extensions, that's fine. Just put these 2 together, and then you're going to need a deep 14mm socket, and then you can get to it no problem. So to separate the transmission, there's a little cover here. It's a little plastic cover. It basically just kind of falls out. And you want to rotate the crankshaft until you see the bolts in there, and you remove the bolts. I think there's 6 in total. And the crank is right here. Turning the engine by the crank bolt to get the torque converter bolts off, you want to turn it clockwise. I mean, since we're replacing it, it doesn't really matter on the old engine, but when you're putting the new one in, the owner's manual says to turn it clockwise like you're tightening it. There's one of the bolts right there that gets removed, so you just rotate it all the way around until all the bolts are removed. Yeah, so there will be 6 in total. I don't know why my car had one black one. I don't think it matters. When you go to loosen it, the thing will kind of spin, but the ratchet will just hit up against like the far right side of it and just stay in place, and you can get them out. So I'm going to remove the bolts on the bottom. The transmission, there's 4 of them on mine. Yours might have 3. I think some of them have 3, maybe if it's the 2-wheel drive. And it might have been smarter to do this before putting the lift here, just because the legs wouldn't be in the way. But not too big of a deal. Getting the AC compressor off. I believe there are 4 bolts and 2 on the bottom, I'm pretty sure. This video is how to remove the hood so you have enough clearance to pull the engine out. It is possible though to get the engine out of there without taking the hood off. I found this out when I was putting in my new engine, but like it has to be a very short chain coming off the end of your cherry picker, and the chain over the top of the engine has to be really short so it only lifts up from the top of the engine a little bit. And even with mine, the end of the cherry picker still bumped into the top of the hood a little bit and scratched it a little bit, but it is possible. So don't be like me and remember to move the hoses for the wiper fluid before you take the bolts off for the hood. You're gonna have to remove these things.
to hold this thing on to get under it. You just pop them off with a trim removal tool. If you're lucky, they don't break. And then the actual wiper things are down here. You just pop them out, they come out really easy, and then you just pull the little hose off of it. They pulled off pretty easy, you can just pull it hard. You could always just cut it too, because the hose will be long enough where you can just, you know, afford to get rid of a centimeter of it. Oh yeah, and you probably are gonna have to remove the hood before you pull the engine up, because I think the top of this is just gonna run into the hood. It's just 4 12mm bolts on both sides. This is the one thing that you're gonna want a friend to help you with though. This hood's really heavy, so you're gonna want one other person to take it off with. Now the lift points for the engine are right here, and then there's another one right here. And I actually had these bolts luckily lying around already that are perfect. And this is actually a safety chain for my trailer, which also haven't been perfect. But these bolts right here, you want to make sure that they have an 8.8 grade, the rating, that's the strength rating. You need to make sure they're strong enough. These ones seem to be a very good length. The threaded part is the inch long. And then I would also recommend getting one of these. I'll show you why in a minute. You only need about like 2 feet of chain, maybe 2 or 3 feet. You really barely need any. And obviously the chain you use, make sure it's, you know, strong enough. The engine probably weighs 200 or 300 pounds. I'm not really sure though, but you know, you get chain that's rated for like, you know, 600 pounds or above, it should be fine. And the reason that I recommend this is because unless you get the ball right in the end of the chain, you can't get the ball in as far, and it's just not holding the chain quite as securely. So obviously you could either just cut the chain the right length, so you're on both ends of it, or I just put that thing there and then you can just stick the chain in it. Just like that. And obviously you just, you know, you could have the chain up a lot longer. I just wanted it shorter like this. Keep the end of the jack lower. Yeah, so all you do is you take one end of the chain, put it in there, bolt it up. So you want to make sure the head on the ball is big enough to where it like keeps the chain from popping off good. And then this is why the length of the ball is important. I want to just use the one that comes in there for the ground wire. Like this is really short. Once you get the chain in, you want a good amount of thread to be in the engine, and you don't want a lot of extra ball coming out of it where it's bottoming out either. And then for me, I already had this laying around. It does kind of make it more convenient. So yeah, and you just want to attach end of the lift, the hook on the lift here around, you know, around like the center part of the chain. Make sure the chain isn't like caught on anything. I might want to move this over because it might jump actually when I'm pulling it up. There, just get it angled a bit better where the chain is pulling from. Now I'm just gonna lift this to where it starts to lift the engine just a tiny bit, and then we can remove that engine mount. And then all the rest are 17. I think you're gonna remove this one, this one, this one here, this one here, and then that one right there. And then be careful, I think these are AC lines. You get, with mine, I have to pull this up a little bit. You know, it's not gonna break, but just be kind of gentle with it when you stretch it. Now you can get to the tensioner ball. The tensioner ball is this big 19mm right down there. It helps if you lift the engine up quite a bit to get to it. You could also remove the mounting bracket right here. That could help too. That would give you a lot more room too. Oh yeah, and then I would recommend just removing that bracket. I think it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so the belt tensioner is kind of tricky. You have to have kind of like the right depth socket. Like when I put this 1/2 inch to 3/8 and then put a short socket on, it worked. The deep socket here is too long. And then to loosen it, make sure you turn it clockwise. So you're turning it in the direction that would normally tighten a bolt. And the owner's manual says to do it slowly. You don't want to just jerk it. And then I was trying to get it off of this, the alternator pulley at first, but you can't get it off there. You have to just slide it off this one right here because it doesn't have the ridge on the end. So once I figured that out, it was pretty easy. And then you have to use kind of a shorter ratchet, but because I was using my long breaker bar before, but then once you release all the tension, the bar got stuck against here because when there's no belt on it, the tensioner goes all the way over, and then I couldn't get my ratchet out. So yeah. And actually, I'm just gonna go ahead and remove this pipe too. There's a two 10 millimeter bolts, one on the top, one on the bottom. Yeah, so there's one here on the top, and then one right here that's underneath this pipe. There, now you can see the other one on the top here. Okay, so now as you can see, there's a lot more room for the AC compressor to get out of the way from the bottom of the engine here. Before it was right up against it, and I just took a strap and just tied the AC compressor around to the bottom of the subframe to keep it there, keep it out of the way. I'm going to go and remove all the ones on the top. Obviously this one here you need a wrench for. There's another one there, another one down below that, so two over here. There's one right under here, and then there's one down there. I think that's all of them, and they're all 17 millimeter. Get the ball off right here. I had to remove the mount for the transmission dipstick. There's just a 12 millimeter bolt there, and then you can just swivel this to the side. And the one down there, you can fit extension right underneath this here. And the one down there is actually another 14 millimeter. It's not a 17. And that one down there is another 14. It's on the back of the engine. It's easiest just to like stand on top of over the engine to get it off. And then just for future reference, the shorter 14 millimeter that goes on top is towards the rear of the car. The longer one is towards the front of the car. And then I like to say this easy to reach one to last. As you can see, that was all of them, because you can see they're starting to separate now, the two halves. Yeah, so mine had these 4 bolts on the bottom of the transmission, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the top, with the 2 lowest ones being 14 millimeters. The bottom one's 14 millimeters, and then the 3 on the top are 17s. Alright, so if you've never separated an engine and transmission before, there's these dowel pins that help you line it up. So there's like a hole in this side on the engine and a hole in the transmission. There's this pin that fits in the middle. On mine, there's one right here, right above that, right where that front engine mount is. It's actually, sorry, I was saying the dowel pin was down here. It's actually right up here. It's like right down there. And then I just want to give a clear view of these dowel pins are. There's one here, one here. Mine both stuck to the engine side, but I don't know, they might be able to come off in the transmission side, so they could be either way. I'm not sure if yours would come out in the engine like mine did. Basically what you want to do is just start sticking pry bars in there. You can use a hammer to bang them in there. You just want to start banging in like bigger and bigger pry bars basically, until you get it separated completely off the dowel pins. And they're sort of long, as you can see. Like this one is probably about a centimeter apart already, and the dowel pin is still not free. Alright, so I just got this thing completely free. You can see how long the dowel pin's in here. So what you can do is like bang a small pry bar in with like a hammer, and then I was using this big ass pry bar there. We also have this skinny pry bar here, and with mine the top of it separated pretty wide and the bottom was still real thin, so I had to go underneath the car, pry a little on the bottom, and then it just kind of popped loose. And also a good idea to put a jack under the bottom of it, that way you can kind of mess around with, like, you know, the position of the engine or the different like position, and you got to mess around with the height and stuff, because certain like height might be easier to get loose. One thing to look out for is the oil pan can run into the subframe here, so make sure it's high enough so it's not getting stuck on that.
And then when you're lifting it out, lift it really slowly, obviously. Look all around the engine for stuff that it might be getting caught on. You know, like look over here at everything, look out for this. Look out for the AC compressor and the lines coming off of it, the wiring harness. So actually this mount here, the axle mount, it'll spin all the way around on the bearing. So when you lift it up, it starts to spin that way. And then you can just actually just move it over, it'll just spin all the way around. Completely out of the way. Yeah, so mainly when you're lifting it up, watch the AC line here very carefully. Like all this stuff wants to run into it. You can kind of move the whole jack or the whole hoist back to get this stuff clear that AC line, and then watch like the hood latch here. Mine was kind of hitting on that too when I was hoisting it up.